Conrad Tao, pianist, composer, man about town. Want to talk to you about Rachmaninoff since it is the 150th anniversary of Rachmaninoff's birth. You're someone who embraces a wide range of classical music, whether it is Mozart or it's contemporary classical music. I know you've got John Adams on coming up, I believe, or you recently did John Adams. But since you're also not just a musician, but you're also a composer, what do you appreciate most as a listener and then also as a composer and a musician when you're hearing or playing Rachmaninoff's work?
Oh God, I mean, in some ways, all the same things that everyone else seems to get out of it, which is, I think, that incredible melodic sensibility first and foremost. Although, no, you know what? As a pianist and a composer, and for me, the two are pretty wrapped up in one another, especially when talking about someone like Rachmaninoff. Um, Actually, that's probably it. Like the thing that I get excited by is like the knowledge that Rachmaninoff himself played the instrument. And we don't know, or I don't know, I haven't read up on whether or not Rachmaninoff liked to compose at the piano, but I can say, having played a lot of his music, that the music feels remarkably good to play at the instrument, which makes a lot of sense given his virtuosity at the instrument and his prolific reputation as a pianist. But for me, it's that intimacy, that feeling of connection to Rachmaninoff, potentially the player through his composition. Um, uh, and everything I love about the music is sort of filtered through that. So I love his voice leading sensibility, this like really rich, chromatic voice leading. There's almost always like four or five different layers going on, integrated into texture, usually passage work, texture, but you have these wonderful close moving lines moving in parallel and then like bending around one another. It's one of my favorite things in almost any music, which is it's the kind of shifting and changing and evolving that you feel almost more than you hear. It's happening inside.
The movie Shine made a big deal about the Rachmaninoff third
Oh,
piano
right,
concerto.
right.
Is it How difficult is Rachmaninoff's music to play?
It's hard. The Rock 3, I just did the third piano concerto last November for the first time in a little while. And yeah, there's no getting around the fact that the piece is quite difficult. Um, but again, I think maybe because my relationship with Rachmaninoff's music is so driven by like I was talking about, the chords and the voice leading and the harmony essentially. Um, and his really unique approach to harmonic progression and stuff. I often feel like what I'm playing, what I'm aspiring to play when I'm playing Rachmaninoff's music is not really the surface notes at all. That the surface notes are kind of just the incidental result of all of the stuff that Rachmaninoff has constructed or is asking me to do, kind of again from like underneath. And so the music is incredibly challenging because it is so dense. Um, but all of that density actually emerges from a root, and so it's as the years have gone by, the challenges have changed.
So, what would be the challenge, say, if you were going to do all four of Rachmaninoff's piano concertos and Paganini all in one concert?
Well, you'll notice that I was not the pianist doing those
No, I
concerts.
know you weren't.
That sounds I cannot. I mean, it sounds kind of fun in the sense that like I would love to hear that progression from like 1 to 5, 5 being the Paganini Rhapsody, because they unlike, say, Beethoven, where all five piano concertos, they span a decent period, but they don't span his entire life. The five Rachmaninoff piano and orchestra pieces like do actually span his life and his entire career, and that is really, really exciting. My arms might fall off. I think they're
Well,
really
I was
very.
at that concert. I
Oh yeah,
flew I flew it because I thought that's a once in a lifetime thing. Nobody in their right mind is going to do this at Carnegie Hall.
nice.
Just with Yuja Wang for anybody who's watching and doesn't know what I'm talking about. It would the order was 2-1-4 Paganini 3.
I heard about this. Yes, I sort of understand saving three for last, but it is I would have I wasn't at any of those shows, but I was really curious. Like, if you listen from one to five, you'd hear this interesting progression, which, especially four and five, which are after Rachmaninoff moves to the U.S., and I suppose that's the premise of my program.
Well, and that's what I one of the things I wanted to ask you about. And I don't know if this is marketing hype just for the Soraya website, but it says that you're quote speculating about Rachmaninoff in the United States. How do you define what that expression means for people who are curious about what this concert might be?
Totally. So Rachmaninoff moved to New York in 1918, and many of his most well-known works were written before then. The third piano concerto, the second piano concerto. Some of his most iconic themes had already been composed before he came to the U.S. Um, However, we know a little bit. We know that Rachmaninoff moved to New York. We know that he was going to the jazz clubs in New York, that he was participating in the musical culture in New York of the 1920s. And and so we can reasonably assume that he would have been hearing the American Songbook from that time. And we know that he was a fan of Art Tatum, who was kind of, I think, I want to say was it's still kind of early in his career in the 20s. So from that, plus knowing some of the music that he wrote after he moved to the US, which to my ears very clearly evinces the influence of jazz, although Rachmaninoff was hardly alone being a composer influenced by jazz. But like that was my starting point. I wanted to explore through Rachmaninoff's music as well as music of those that he may have heard when he was in New York, as well as future composers, songwriters who we know were influenced by Rachmaninoff and or may have been influenced by Rachmaninoff. Through that, I wanted to explore what his influence may have been from and on American jazz and popular music and songwriting.
And that, from what I've been reading, allows you to do some improvisation as well. So where's the improvisational component when we know that all the people that you've mentioned and a couple that you haven't, Billy Strayhorn and Stephen Sondheim, all have formal writing, but you're going to add improvisation to this dialogue? How?
Yes, and so Strayhorn is one, and I mentioned Tatum, and Tatum and Strayhorn. Strayhorn was a brilliant writer and a incredible songwriter and composer. Um, Tatum was not known for that at all, but they were both pianists and they were both improvisers. Tatum, kind of probably an unmatched improviser in terms of like just what he was capable of doing. It really sounds quite superhuman, if anything. And Strayhorn took a very different approach, but so I am kind of contributing simply being another voice in the mix of improvisers and composers. Although what I'm doing, I'm quite excited to share. It's I'm going to be improvising on one of the variations from the Rachmaninoff Paganini Rhapsody. And the first time I played the Rhapsody on a theme of Paganini was in 2007, I want to say. It was like 12 or 13. And almost since that time, I have been doing a version of this improvisation. It was one of the first things I consciously remember improvising on, and and I always had ambitions that it would become a piece or something, and it never did. But
Yet.
yes, yes, exactly. But well, and I don't know if it will become a notated thing necessarily because it's been ever since this program started forming. It seemed like a really exciting time to bring this back, this memory from my earlier years, and so I'm very excited about that. It's quite in some ways it's a little very personal thing.
how much does your adding new improvisations to Rachmaninoff's work, or any of the people who may have been influenced by him, allow you to help bring an understanding of Rachmaninoff's work into present day and perhaps continuing that dialogue into the future?
I don't know if it contributes to understanding the work. Maybe I think the aspects I'm foregrounding maybe are aspects that people don't first think of when they think of Rachmaninoff's work. I think probably when most people think about Rachmaninoff, they think about the amazing themes and the virtuosity. That's my guess. Um, and both of those aspects, I mean, the themes are very present. In a lot of ways, this whole program is kind of like just a program of songs, even if not everything is explicitly a song. But like just the music itself speaks to that, in my opinion. Um, but perhaps the ways in which Rachmaninoff's harmony came to inflect popular music in decades following, the ways in which some of Rachmaninoff's harmonic exploration that predated his move to New York kind of got newly foregrounded, I think, after he moved to New York and after he discovered all these musicians who may have been like unexpectedly sympathetic to things that he was already doing. I don't know. I mean, that's why I say speculating. It's hard to know exactly what might have been going through his head, but these are maybe aspects that people don't automatically think about. Or maybe I sometimes I feel like they're actually more what people think about. This program, the ask for this program first came into my inbox like last spring, and I had just happened to see um, David Lean's Brief Encounter for the first time with that beautiful Noel Coward script. And first of all, I had been recommended the movie, but like I was totally unprepared for how beautiful and and formally inventive and emotional it was, and the way that it uses Rachmaninoff's second piano concerto is so fantastic, and it's like not quite diegetic, but not quite not diegetic. Like it's in this beautiful middle zone where it's like it represents this person's subconscious in a way, or internal dialogue, and it lit my brain on fire, and it was such a emotional experience watching that film, and I found myself just really open to this idea of exploring Rachmaninoff beyond the concert hall in a way.
Well, and there are probably not too many people who know of a song called "Full Moon and Empty Arms,"
Yeah, exactly. Right.
which literally took a melody from the second piano concerto and turned it into a popular song, as did "All by Myself."
Don't be giving things away.
Well, let's
Because there
talk.
is, in fact, there is going to be an Irving Berlin tune called "All by Myself" on the program, but yes, don't give things away.
Well, it is common knowledge. It's not like you and I are speaking in some code of private conversations. Um,
Yeah, exactly. There is precedent for this topic, I dove into this idea.
um, I want to ask you about one song by Billy Strayhorn, and you can probably guess which one, because it is my favorite song of all time, and I don't understand how a young man of his age could compose Lush Life.
Yeah, yeah, I figured. I don't know either, right? And I mean the lyrics have such wonderful ambiguity about them, and it's such a I mean it's such a I was gonna say heartbreaking, but not quite. Like it's also there's almost a sort of wary, humorous resignation in the mix. There's some irony I feel as well, and yeah, I don't know either. I mean, it's that's not even getting into how musically complex it is as well. I feel like both of those layers are so important to one another, and the fact that he wrote both of them, yeah, it kind of blows your mind.
And then you hear him sing it, and I'm hoping you've heard him sing it. He does the most upbeat version of that song I've ever heard. He's the only one who like gives it a little spry rhythm to it.
This is what I'm telling you is like he brings this kind of wry quality into it. It's really, yes, I love that recording. That one recording of him singing. I love the laughter you hear in the audience as well. Like he's delivering it with, with a wink and a puff.
And an ownership.
Yeah.
He has a real ownership. I happen to love Betty LaVette's version. That will just tear
Uh,
anybody apart.
I've heard the Johnny Hartman version. There's a beautiful recording that Jason Moran and Archie Shepp did together. Linda
Yes, there's
Ronstadt, Queen Latifah, so many different interpretations.
absolutely, as there are of Stephen Sondheim's music, who is part of the program as it's been described. You did a transcription of Move On for Anthony Demere's, continuing liaisons project, which I got to see him perform live, which I thought was terrific. You also last year posted a solo piano version of Sunday on your Instagram account. How does Sondheim's work inspire you? I would assume as knowing that you love complexity and simplicity, and I feel like he does both hand in hand very well. This has to be somebody who's inspired you.
Absolutely. So I love, I mean, there's so many great things about Sondheim. That's the wonderful gift that he left us with such a varied output that nonetheless like always has like rich consideration of every note and every word. And my personal favorite Sondheim is um I mean this really describes almost all of his work. Like the way that he's able to uh use music to underscore or undercut the words that a character is singing, which is really like of the age-old tradition. I mean, Mozartian opera does this as well. Like it's just one of the great joys of writing theater music. I think is being able to do that. In the song that's on this program, which is "In Buddy's Eyes" from Follies, it's if you I suppose there is a version of the song that is completely just taken at face value, where the lyrics that Sally is singing are simply just an expression of appreciation for her adoring husband. But we have, by this point in the show, we have enough context to realize that she's kind of trying to console herself, or she's kind of like staring into the abyss as she sings these words, while also sort of like knowing that there's truth in what she's singing too. I feel like that complexity you can feel in the harmony, in the pungent chords that occasionally disrupt what is otherwise like a placid surface. um I mean, that's just one of the great joys of that music. And in a way, playing the music without words and just kind of, especially with something like Sunday, when I first did Sunday as a solo piano encore, um, I first did it the night that he passed away. I happened to be working that night. And it was really incredible to me how you can perceive all of this drama just in the music. Um, and so, yeah, I don't know. For me, Sondheim is almost a psychedelic experience because there is just this kind of like endlessly unfolding um, layers of meaning. And yeah, it's addicting.
And hearing it solo, whether it's in what you did or in the transcriptions that Anthony plays, really helps further the argument that he was just as fine a composer as he was a lyricist, even though most people think of him as a lyricist
I
first.
can't. I don't understand. I completely. I mean, like maybe I think that probably has to do with the fact that Sondheim does write sometimes in an almost like patter instrumental way for the voice. Perhaps I don't know. I can't relate to the narrative that Sondheim doesn't write melodies. I just don't get it.
Yeah,
And
nor do I.
the song that's on this program really, I feel like should put all that to rest.
Right. Now you've talked about the output that Rachmaninoff had. You've talked about the out the complete output that Sondheim had. We haven't had any new recordings from you, of in quite a while. Not to put your feet to the fire on this. I mean, you did compose stones for Johnny Gandelsman's This Is America project. Um, and I know you had the premiere of Keyed In, which has been seen perhaps selectively. But to paraphrase Sunday in the Park with George, when are you going to give us more to see?
Oh, well, thank you for wanting more. I it is it is a process. I know I am a little slower when it comes to the recorded output. I am slower, I know. But I have ideas and things are slowly moving ahead, but
Well, you've also been very active as a performer, and I'm wondering how much that takes time away from the time you would have for composing. Because certainly I mean, I know you're insanely talented, but I don't think you just show up and suddenly play the Rock 3. I assume you have to practice.
yeah, sure. Yes, I. It's hard to do both at the same time, to perform and to write. They're different kinds of work, and yeah, the only way that I've learned to do it is to block out time. I have like I have a color in my cumulative calendar that is called a vacation calendar, but it's mostly a staycation calendar where I just say like when I'm at like I find periods where I'm at home and I literally just write like guard this time. Cause I'm like it's not just this my schedule, it's also the fact that I love working and doing stuff and sometimes I have to remember that I need to block out time to not do anything sometimes.
Yeah.
I feel
To
like
do-
that almost is more important than blocking out the time to compose at this point, is like to block the time out to enforce like, no, you're vegging out for a day.
or two.
Yeah, maybe sometimes.
Right. All right. Well, this is the toughest question I'm going to ask you, and going to put it right on record. And for anybody who watches this, they will know that you and I have had a previous history talking about this. Who should win RuPaul's Drag Race, and who will win RuPaul's Drag Race?
Ooh. Should is hard. I am rooting for Sasha Colby this year in general, and I feel like she could comfortably slot into both the should and and will spots. I have been following Sasha for a little while, and I don't know if you or anyone who might be watching this has seen her winning Miss Continental Talent performance from 2012, but it is fantastic. She's got really good taste in music, and it's like a great pick me up for if you're ever feeling unmotivated or down on yourself. So I love what Sasha's doing. I think she brings such a wonderful perspective to the show. I also am obsessed with Anitra, who is on this season, who is such a great performer and is who also, you know, part of that show is always, the painful, honest stories about what it's like to grow up queer or a queen or anything. And her story is one of the most horrifyingly like raw and upsetting ones I've ever heard, and it's stuck with me ever since she told it. Um, so yeah, those are my two.
Yeah, I have to say I kind of like Mistress Brooks.
Oh, fabulous too.
She's really good. She's really shady.
She's
Um,
she knows herself. She's
she
smart.
knows herself very well, and it is time for a big girl to win. I'd hoped Eureka would have broken that glass ceiling.
I could
Um,
see it sooner for Mistress. That's true.
I could too.
It's a really good cast. Lux has also grown on me a lot, although I kind of want to see her on All Stars. I feel like that would be an amazing showcase. It's been a good season. I had mixed feelings at first, but I'm enjoying it a lot now.
I did too. It's since you and I last spoke, I've gotten married, so my husband and I make that our Friday thing to do.
Oh, it's so great. I got to see it actually for the first time. I saw a live viewing in a bar when I was in DC a few weeks ago, and it's great. It's so nice to see it with friends.
It is absolutely. So, Conrad, I'm going to close by asking you about something that Rachmaninoff said.
Hmm.
He said, "The new kind of music seems to create not from the heart, but from the head. Its composer thinks rather than feels. They have not the capacity to make their works exalt. They meditate, protest, analyze, reason, calculate, and brood, but they do not exalt." Composer to composer, if you had a chance to talk to Rachmaninoff about what new kind of music is and
Mm.
what's being done today, what would you tell him?
You know, I have a feeling that we might not totally agree, but that we'd share the same values. Because I'm not familiar with that quote, by the way. That's a really, really vivid quote. Um I agree. I actually really agree that it's so easy and common for composers um to get lost in cleverness perhaps. Um and this is actually something that the late composer Frederick Rzewski once said. Um and he said, you know, I think that sometimes people don't always write music that's just like the melodies that are going through their heads. And I'm still trying to write the melodies that are going through my head. And I relate to that, you know? Like whatever exalt means to someone, like that goal, that desire to sort of communicate something of one's feeling, one's perspective on the world and one's being, I suppose, at the risk of being a little fanciful. That's why I do it. I think so. I think that we might have different tastes, and I might try to persuade him of some experimental work, and it's uh, gesturing towards exaltation as well, because that's what attracts me to various forms of music. But I think that is what I'm looking for, is that feeling, that feeling of resonance, that feeling of being transported, that feeling of being transfixed. So perhaps exalted as well.